Okay, so I'm recording this for any students who missed the first day of the internship training for the Upward Bound interns. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. So please make sure you take notes as you watch this video, and please make sure you ask any questions that you may have. You will have some assignments associated with this since you had to miss the actual training where we would have worked together. So please be prepared to have some training materials completed by the time you come to the internship tomorrow. So today is the first day, as I mentioned, September 30th. We began with a team building exercise, which I will not go over here, but if you've never played it, the Would You Rather game is really fun, and you can always search those questions online. They're along the lines of, would you rather have a pet elephant or a goat? Questions that, just what do you prefer, helps you get to know some of the people around you. Can be really fun. We played that game today to help get to know one another, because we need to be a strong and cohesive team. And it's also always nice to get to know people, especially people that you already know slightly, get to know new things about them. I will not be going over that right now. I do want to talk about the services Upward Bound offers because you're going to be asked about that. Your primary duty with our internship is going to be recruitment. And so as you approach new students and families to ask them to join the program, they're going to ask you, what does Upward Bound do, or what services do they offer? As alumni to the program, you already know what we do. So just answer honestly. You know we do pretty much anything that you need help with along the college application process. But specifically, it's always helpful to have a little checklist that you can go through. I've been working with Upward Bound for years and years now, and I still will refer to this checklist even though I do actually have it memorized. It's just always helpful to have a checkoff point. So I'm going to share this presentation with you in addition to recording this video. Please make sure you know what services we offer when you go to recruit the students to the program, especially if they're services that you've never taken advantage of. So just to highlight what we do help with college application and enrollment tracking. So we're going to help students not only apply to college, but we're going to track where they are in the process of actually finalizing their enrollment there up until registration, maybe even when school starts. We're going to provide assertive advising, which means that we're going to outreach to students and check on their progress. We're not going to wait for them to come to us and ask for help. That's assertive advising, or intrusive advising, as other people have called it. That's why you'll notice that we'll go up to you and ask if you need anything or just start helping you rather than waiting for you to come to us. That's assertive advising, and that is a regular practice with Upward Bound programs. We also offer mentorship, where we're able to be friends and talk about things that are more than just college related. We, as I mentioned, offer college application help, but specifically I listed that on there twice, a second time, because we'll provide intensive support for college application essays. We also help out with financial aid, filling out the FAFSA or the WASPA for students, and helping them get the most money that they possibly can. We'll help with scholarships and provide essay support for that. We'll even introduce students to scholarships. When we're at the school, and as much as we can now, we provide in-class tutoring. And at the time we were at the high school, it was mandatory for students who have below a 2.5. And that's because a 2.5 GPA is around the minimum that four-year competitive schools are willing to accept from students. And so we want students to be college bound. We don't want to accept anything less than a 2.5. So students that you recruit to the program, please make sure they have a minimum GPA of a 2.5. And we also help with advocacy, empowerment, and encouragement. Advocacy is when something unfair is happening to the student, we will go and argue for something more equitable or fair to happen for the student. A good example of this is when students were enrolled in ELL classes and were automatically denied access to Cater, which would have given them the ability to apply for four-year competitive schools. If students are not taking Cater English classes because they're taking ELL classes, then they're automatically not able to go to any of those four-year schools. And so we went and brought that to the attention of the counselors, the principals, the school board, and as a result, now the ELL classes actually have an English component in them so that ELL students can also be competitive for school. That's advocacy. We advocated on behalf of those students. A lot of the time, advocacy will be more one-on-one, so like a student isn't able to register because a professor doesn't think they're capable, we'll go and talk to the professor, stuff like that. Obviously, empowerment is something that we work on, but it's not always clear why. Students who are empowered tend to do better when they're in school, and they tend to get better careers. And we want people, especially people from different cultures, from the traditional cultures that are present in college, to feel like they belong in college and to actually change the statistics that are working against their demographic. So it's really important that students feel not only empowered as individuals, but empowered as a part of a larger culture and community. We have 6 objectives that drive everything we do. Oh, before we move on to that, I do want to say you will get questions about the services Upward Bound offers, but you will also get questions about how much it costs to join Upward Bound. Keep in mind that Upward Bound is free for students and families, and that will actually pay students to be in the program. So if families ask about that, do mention that the program is free, and also don't forget to mention that it is a federal program, which means that we do have to require documentation. We are not a school club. We are a federal program, kind of like the military, actually. And so people have to actually apply. They have to join the program and will be admitted into the program. And it's very different from a school club. We only serve 60 students, maybe slightly above that. So very personalized services at no cost to students or families. Now, we have 6 objectives the U.S. Department of Education mandates we strive to achieve. So we try to ensure our students achieve all 6 of these objectives. I don't think I've ever shown any students directly, but this is why we do the work the way that we do work, and why we really don't take no for an answer when students join our program and then later say they don't want to go to college. So objective 1, students will have a cumulative GPA of 2.5 or better. We need to make sure they have a 2.5 so that they get accepted into college, because 2.5 is competitive. Below that is not. Objective number 2, students will have achieved at proficient level on state assessments. This is actually a really, really difficult one to achieve in, well, anywhere, but Shelton especially. And often we have a hard time achieving that. However, we do provide test prep services, we do provide testing support, and we try to provide tutoring so that students can do better on these state assessments. And that's not necessarily unique, that the Shelton program will be less productive in that area because state assessments are inherently biased. And there are other issues we can go into with that, but objective 2, we're going to help them do better on tests. Objective 3, students will continue in school for the next academic year at the next grade level, or will have graduated with a regular high school diploma. That basically means that they're going to not be held back in school as a result of their grades, and they're going to graduate on time. We're not going to have any super seniors in our program. Objective 4, students will complete a rigorous secondary school program of study. So that basically means that we're going to ensure students take cater courses and take courses that are going to make them more competitive for the schools that they want to attend, like AP classes or IB classes. And once again, we'll help them prepare for those tests as well. But that's something that we're required to do by the Department of Education. Objective 5 is the most challenging objective to achieve, and it is worth the most points in our grant. So all of the other objectives, we get 1 prior experience point, which contributes to the likelihood that our grant will be renewed. Objective 5 is worth 3 points, actually. And that is that students will enroll in a program of post-secondary education by the fall term immediately following high school graduation. Statistics show that first-generation, low-income students, students of color, tend to do better, and they're more likely to continue on with their college education if they go to school immediately after high school graduation, rather than taking a gap year or taking quarters off, where they are less likely to go back the more time they spend in the workforce. So that one's a very important one, because this is the one that actually largely contributes to the graduation rates that Upward Bound has, which are usually pretty high. And then of course, objective 6 is that students will attain either an associate's within 3 years or a bachelor's degree within 6 years after graduating from high school. Obviously, this is really important. I think this one's also only worth 1 point. It's not quite as important as objective number 5, But this goes to show that the programming we do isn't about just getting them into college, it's about getting them to graduate from college. And community colleges, getting them to graduate within 3 years, and state colleges, getting them to graduate within 6 years. Students will often leave school and come back, leave school and come back. It doesn't matter as long as they graduate within that time and they go to school the fall term immediately following high school graduation, then our grant will still get those points. So this is what drives the work that we do, and this is what ensures that our grant will be renewed, which means that we will keep our jobs. So as Upward Bound employees, we are very highly motivated to ensure that students meet those 6 objectives, and we don't want to admit students into our program who are not going to go to college and who are going to actually make it harder for us to meet these objectives. So please keep these objectives in mind as you're recruiting. Okay. Some things to know about Upward Bound is Upward Bound only admits students who have committed to going to college immediately following high school graduation. So we would ask that in the interview, hey, do you plan to go to college immediately after high school graduation? And we don't let people into our program who say no. We've also begun to implement a contract system that both students, parents, and our program have to agree to in order for the student to be admitted. And so far that's yielded pretty good results where the students are much more engaged in the work that we do. Hopefully that will ensure that we don't have students who go off to the military, which actually damages our objectives, or go directly into the workforce or other training programs like that, which do not count toward our objectives. Upward Bound reports on students after they join and will continue to be held accountable for their college degree long after high school graduation. For between 7 and 10 years after graduation, we'll continue to track students because we're held accountable to that 6th objective. Research shows that it is common for first-generation to college students to try to give up on their college plan before they're even admitted, especially because usually they'll have big goals at the beginning of high school that will later be discouraged by teachers, parents, friends, all kinds of things will come across, and they'll lose track of those goals by the time they graduate. But Upward Bound is held accountable for all participants' post-secondary educational achievements, and we'll report on this for 10 years after you guys graduate or after students graduate from high school to the Department of Education, as I mentioned earlier. Knowing this, we will continue to stir up students even when you want to quit, or even when students want to quit Upward Bound. You really can't quit. We're a federal program. We're not a school club like track. Our goal is to provide Upward Bound students with as many opportunities as possible to achieve their goals with little or no debt to students or families. This goal, as well as researched outcomes, influence our approach to advising students. And so I want you to keep that in mind. This isn't about us getting money. Like, we don't get any money for the students going to any particular school. We don't get any money for the students joining our program. That's not how it works. We're on salary. We get a certain amount every month regardless. We want to see students succeed. We're trying to change the statistics associated with non-traditional students, and I'm going to go over that in a minute. But we're personally motivated to continue helping students. A lot of our staff, actually I think all of our staff with the Shelton Upward Bound program are first generation to college students ourselves. We all grew up low income, and some of us have even struggled with documentation issues. And so we know what the students are struggling for, and we also know what students can gain by getting an education. And so this is very important. We utilize and we research and utilize outcome-driven, high-impact practices to help students graduate from college. This is what influences our approach. So I'm pretty sure you guys have seen this before. I think I've showed it to you guys a couple of times. People often think that I don't like community colleges or two-year colleges, and that's not true. But we do have to prioritize. What will likely meet our objectives. So with the Upward Bound Shelton program, we definitely will encourage students to apply to four-year colleges. We'll even require students to apply to four-year colleges. The reasons are that they have a competitive admissions process, so there's a likelihood that students won't get in, regardless of whether or not it's high or low. It is competitive, so they have to get accepted in order to go. Graduation rates at four-year public institutions within 6 years are roughly 58% nationwide. That was last year, of course. The graduation rate is about 65% nationwide at private four-year colleges and universities within 6 years. Those tend to be the best option for the upward bound students. However, they tend to have a really high cost of attendance, and that makes it to where our students are less likely to be able to succeed there, because the likelihood that they'll be able to continue there throughout their 4 to 6 year education is slim if they don't have scholarships available. So definitely the public and private 4-year institutions have above 50% graduation rates, which is not the best, but it is nationwide. Some schools have higher graduation rates than that, some have lower, but it is significantly better than the community colleges, which we'll go over in a second. And those graduation rates means that the likelihood that the students who graduate from the Upward Bound program will graduate is much higher. Another reason I want to encourage students to go into 4-year colleges actually is cost effectiveness, because a lot of the times students going to 4-year colleges are automatically enrolled in 100 level classes, which means that they're earning college credit. That's not necessarily the case at community college, and that can end up costing a lot of money if you're in college for a number of years and you're not earning college credit. You're still trying to work toward a degree, and if you're not getting the credit to go toward that degree, then it's going to take longer for you to get there, and you're still paying the same amount of money. So that actually helps with the finances for first generation or low income students to be at 4-year institutions, because they're actually getting college credit for their classes. And another thing that people actually don't think about, they actually think the opposite of this. 4-year colleges are used to traditional students. Traditional students are students who are able to go straight out of high school to college. Usually they are white male students that we identify as traditional, but white female students are also considered traditional. Usually they don't file the FAFSA, which means that you have more spoiled rotten high school kids going off to college, spoiled rotten rich high school kids going off to these 4-year colleges, which means that the professors have a lot of motivation to be flexible with these students, because a lot of the times their parents are powerful. I taught at a university where some of my students, the buildings were named after their families, which meant that their families gave a lot to the institution. And so we had to be flexible with how we accepted work from them. And they acted like children. And so because they acted like children, we were, treating them a little bit more like they were straight out of high school. That actually is fairly consistent at a lot of 4-year colleges and universities. It's not 100% consistent, but it's fairly consistent across the board. For 2-year colleges or community colleges, I actually do like them because they do tend to be more supportive of non-traditional students. They do tend to have more, or they want to have more resources available. So they'll invest the little funds that they do have in helping non-traditional students a little bit more than the universities will. However, only 22% graduate within 3 years across the nation at 2-year colleges. And actually some community colleges, it's so bad that they won't even list their graduation rates online. Unfortunately, I think some of our local colleges are pretty bad about that. SPSCC and Pierce College are both actually pretty good when it comes to the graduation rates. So those are more supportive schools if students are looking to go there. But keep in mind that the graduation rate listed on here at 22% is nationwide. So it's even averaging out those better ones. That means that less than 1 out of 4 students is graduating from a community college. And that's concerning if you're dealing with first generation, low income students or students of color who have generally less access to this, less access to money and less access to professional level careers. We want to increase the likelihood that they're going to gain a professional level career and have a higher quality of living as a result of their education. So I don't want to set students up for failure, and only 1 out of 4 students, if I send 4 students to community college, that means that 3 of them are probably not going to graduate. I definitely keep that in mind when I'm recruiting students and when I'm helping them enroll into college. At community colleges, students often test into below 100 level courses, and this probably contributes to why the graduation rates are so low, actually. These courses can be helpful for helping students catch up to 100 level where they would be earning college credit, but they're paying the same amount of money for classes that aren't earning them college credit, that are not working toward their degree, which means they pay a lot of money for classes that don't matter. And that ends up making it to where people often stay longer than 3 years. If you're staying longer than 3 years at a 2-year institution, then you may as well have gone to a 4-year college. It'll be cheaper. You'll get college credits for the classes you're taking. the degree is actually considered educated. A 2-year degree is a partial degree or a transfer degree, which means that it's not recognized as educated. When we recruit students, we have to make sure that they're either the first in their family to go to college or that they are low-income students. If their parents have gone to a community college, we can still admit them into our program as being first generation to college, because technically their parents don't have a degree. So we don't want students just limiting their goals on community college if we can help it, because their quality of life is going to increase the higher the level of degree they have. Another thing to keep in mind is that 2-year colleges are actually more prepared for non-traditional students, which often means that their students are parents, they're returning students, they're adults, which means that they've actually been in the workforce for a while. And once you've been in the workforce for a while, you know that the workforce isn't actually that flexible. You have to be to work on time. If you miss too many days, you lose your job. You have to do your projects on time. If you don't meet deadlines, then you might lose your job. So the professors, knowing this, have less flexibility with their students, which can be really problematic if you have running start students and non-traditional students in your class at the same time. But that being said, they're not as prepared for straight out of high school students, and it actually frustrates them a lot to deal with kids when they're used to teaching adults. And that's often the way they see it. So sometimes they're less flexible about people turning in late work. Sometimes they're less flexible about people missing class time, even if they have a legitimate excuse for it. And that's just something to be aware of, that they're not really used to dealing with kids at community college as much as they are at the 4-year institutions. And by kids, I mean straight out of high school. And another thing to keep in mind about the 2-year schools is that the students can always get into them pretty much. There's very little that'll keep them from going to those community colleges or those 2-year colleges in terms of their grades or their academics or anything like that. It's considered non-competitive enrollment for most of those schools. And so usually all a student will have to do is fill out an application and they can get enrolled into a community college. So usually we will begin by having students apply for the 4-year schools. If they don't get into the 4-year schools, then we have them enroll in the 2-year schools. If they choose not to go to the 2-year schools, then we'll offer other options for them. However, the last option I really try not to offer to too many students. The trade schools tend to be a little bit better, but they don't offer transferable degrees usually, if they even offer degrees. A lot of the times they'll only offer certifications. I don't think they count toward our objectives. They might actually, but that's not the point. The point is the quality of life that the student will experience. And if they're only getting certifications or non-transferable degrees and they actually want a degree later on, then they have to start all over again and they would have wasted that money. Although certifications are helpful. For-profit colleges are a waste of money. For-profit colleges are businesses that are trying to make money off of people going to college. So usually what they will do is they will train you to work in a very specific career field, and they will train you to work at a very specific business. One of the for-profit schools I actually will encourage students to look at is DigiPen, because of the really high employment rate that they have because of their partnership with Nintendo. But one of the things people have to realize is DigiPen, which is an institution that's supposed to help you become a game designer. Game design is a very competitive industry, and it's actually really low paying and very, very hard to do. So some things to keep in mind: some of these for-profit schools, even though they're offering really competitive degrees that seem really cool, you might want to look into the career field, because it might not be as ideal as it seems. It might be better to actually be a gamer than to make the games yourself. It really depends on where you're employed, but I've heard a lot of horror stories about some of those places. That also contributes to limited career options after graduation. A lot of the times when you apply for jobs, it'll say, I want you to have this degree in this field, or a related field. When you have those for-profit degrees or those trade degrees, usually that's very limited. You're only able to apply for jobs within that very specific field. For-profit colleges are private institutions. I don't think that's really advertised. And they have a for-profit approach, which means that students who go to the for-profit institutions tend to be in a lot of debt by the time they leave, and they don't graduate. Most students do not graduate. It's got a little bit of a higher graduation rate if you just look right off the top of the page here than the community college, but that's actually not true. The community college is 22% graduation rate nationwide within 3 years. And the graduation rate for trade and for-profit, actually, I think this is for-profit institutions. The graduation rate for for-profit institutions is 23% within 6 years. And usually those are 1 to 2 year programs. So definitely we don't want students going to the for-profit colleges. I think they may even be illegal now, some of them. But we definitely want to make it an option if that's where they want to go. And actually some students have graduated from Upward Bound with for-profit degrees and have good careers in the very specific field that they were looking to get a career in. So it's not completely off the table. It's just that all these negative things make it less desirable to send students there, especially since they may not succeed, statistically speaking. So this is our approach to the college application process. You're probably not going to be helping students much with the actual college application, but they may have questions about our approach for this, and you may be able to answer just by referencing this chart here. Like I said, I'll share the presentation with you and you can reference it at your will if you want to. All right, I'm going to go into some examples of research that influences our practice. I think the charts themselves are somewhat out of date, but the information isn't necessarily irrelevant. I think the oldest information I have is from like 2010, if I'm not mistaken. But the trends continue. And so when I checked the research, instead of creating my own graphs out of what I found, I decided to find charts that just showed what I was seeing in the data, but visually it's just not the same numbers. The trends are the same, but the numbers aren't the same. So just to show you what I mean, this is something that influences some of our practices. This is college enrollment levels by income or percent by income. So the percentage of high school completers who enrolled in a 2 to 4 year college. Excuse me. As you can see, the blue is the low income, far less stable over the years. Excuse me. And during times of economic instability, far fewer students enroll in college. But this just goes to show that the access is really not as there for lower income students. And you can see this information goes pretty far back, but the trends are the same. The trends haven't changed over the years. They are the same to this day, that lower income students tend to go to college a lot less than middle income or higher income. This one's really, really important for the stuff that we do. Upward Bound's mission is to help low-income students become the first in their family to go to college. Just a note, when you recruit students, do not mention that we serve low-income students or that our program is for low-income students. 80%, or I think it's 75% actually, 75% of the students at Shelton High School are technically low-income students. And so our approach in recruiting students is just to assume that they're low income and then later let them know if they do not qualify, because even if they're not low income, chances are they're first generation if they're not low income. Most students at Shelton High School are both. But there's a huge stigma about being low income at Shelton High School, and so getting students to admit that they're low income or that they need help for being low income is actually really, really hard. A lot of students like to pretend that they're not low income and that they're actually very high income, which is not uncommon for small towns. Just know that 75% of the students who attended Shelton High School when we did the research were low income, and likely that number has increased, not decreased, as a result of the pandemic. So just tell the students that you're recruiting first generation to college students to join the Upward Bound program, and chances are they'll qualify just on the basis of being low income alone. Now, this one is really important. This one very largely motivates the work that we do. So these are college graduation rates based off of students' demographics. As you can see, students who are not low income or not first generation, which are basically traditional students who are expected to go to college, 71.2% attained a bachelor's degree who initially enrolled in the four-year institution, and 15.8% dropped out. So most of the students who enrolled at an institution from this survey ended up graduating, like 3 out of 4 of them actually. So students who are first generation but not low income, as you can see, that number changed quite a bit, but we still had 51% achieving a bachelor's degree within 6 years, and 26.7% dropping out. That's still a pretty high dropout number, but 51% attaining a bachelor's degree of first generation students is still about half of the students achieving a bachelor's degree. Now, low income students who are not first generation, meaning that their parents got a degree, but they're still low income somehow. As you can see, 47.8% of those students achieved a bachelor's degree, so less than half. And almost the same number of students dropped out, 32.7% of students. So that's actually pretty close. And then you see our demographics, which are usually the low income and first generation to college students. Only 31.6% achieved a bachelor's degree within 6 years, and 40.4% dropped out, which means that more low income first generation students drop out of college than actually achieve a bachelor's degree. And that's actually why Upward Bound exists to begin with, because the federal government recognized that these trends were occurring and have continued to occur since the 60s when Upward Bound was created. I think it was 1964 when Upward Bound was first established. And those trends have continued. Upward Bound is making a difference in the number of students, but it's systemic issues that we're trying to challenge. And we're doing that by working with individual students, and that we can't possibly change the system unless, you know, the people at the top of the system want to change. So until then, we're going to continue working with individual students, hoping that we'll work with enough individual students that we will eventually not need to actually have our job. That eventually we will no longer have to help students go to college and we can go get work doing something else. But this number needs to change, and that's why we're doing the work that we do. Now, this is actually really important. This is, I think, a pretty old, like 2011, yeah. This is a pretty old graph, but these trends have also continued. As we can see, whites and Asians tend to achieve a bachelor's degree, or let's see, is it? Yeah, 4, 5, and 6-year degree attainment rates. So yeah, this is a bachelor's degree level. As we can see, Asians and whites tend to achieve a bachelor's degree consistently across all these years at a higher level than the other demographics, followed actually not very closely by Latinos, who achieve it at just over 50% within 6 years and definitely below that for the other years, followed by Black students who are just above 40% at 6 years and less than that in preceding years. And then finally, American Indian students, and actually Pacific Islander students have very similar statistics when it comes to graduating on time. The access for American Indians and Pacific Islander students, or American Indians, what they have on here, Native Americans, the access is not there as much as it is for other students. So this is relevant to your recruitment process, because we want to make sure that students who have less access receive our help. And so one thing that you'll notice is that Asians and whites, because they achieve these bachelor's degrees at a higher rate than the others, actually what we found is that the Asian students and the white students tend to ask us for help. They tend to come to us and ask us if they can join the program. Not that we don't go up to them and ask them if they want to join, but we don't have to try as hard to get them to join the program, and we don't have to try as hard to get them to end up enrolling and going to college. The work is different with them. We're working on different things. But the college attainment rate in Shelton is very low, and that trickles down, and the statistics look the same except lower in Shelton. And so it's really important that you as interns make sure that you're recruiting students who need our help, who need help accessing college. And as you can see, the Latinos, the Black students, and the Native American students, the Pacific Islander students, they have less access than the others, which means that they're less expected to go to college, which means that they're probably not going to ask you to help them go to college, which means that it's your responsibility to identify these individuals and say, they probably have high goals. I'm going to ask them about their goals. And if their goals require a college degree, I'm going to get them to join the Upward Bound program because they don't know what they don't know yet. And that's something to keep in mind. We want to change these statistics so that these demographics are closer to these, if not surpass these demographics here, because we want to see it's more equitable. We want to see that all demographics are achieving degrees relatively at the same rate. We don't have to have everyone get degrees, but we want to see that everyone who wants a degree gets a degree, and we want to see that everybody has access to a high quality career. And so even those individuals who don't know they want a degree might know that they want a better career and not know that this is how to access it. So it's very important that you pay attention to the students that you are recruiting and make an active effort to recruit the students who have less access. So Latino students, Native American students, Pacific Islander students, Southeast Asian students actually have similar success rates, like the Vietnamese, Cambodian students, Laotian students, and whatnot, as the Pacific Islander students, Filipinos. And we want to see Black students achieve better too. So if you see a Black student walking around in Shelton with a University of Washington sweatshirt, find out if they want to go to University of Washington, and if they go to Shelton High School, see if they want to join the Upward Bound program. Another thing to keep in mind is actually men have less access to college than women. This is from a long time ago. These numbers have gone up, but it's very consistent that at any college a student might want to go to, any college, you look at the demographics, they have more females than males, or more female identified than males, I should say, male identified. We also have a lot of people in the LGBTQ spectrum who identify as maybe neither or a combination, and I don't think that that's included in the statistics that they're projecting out in their recruitment materials. And so knowing this, I actually know that I probably don't have to work as hard to get girls to want to go to college, or to get women to want to go to college, because there are more girls at most colleges, which suggests to me that girls know the value of college a little bit better than boys do at this younger age. That's not an insult to boys, that's just that the way that they think. And another thing that I can count on is girls and women are more likely to come and ask us to join the program. They're more likely to ask us for help than the guys are. So that's something else to keep in mind. If you know that someone that you're working with is of the demographics that have less access and they're male, then we definitely want to make sure that they have a chance to join our program if they want to, because the likelihood that they'll encounter challenges as they go to apply for college is really high. So keep that in mind when you're recruiting. Black and brown men have less access, and so we want to make sure that they know our program's available, and we may have to go out of our way to make sure they know that a little bit more than we do have to with the women or with the other ethnic demographics. So keep that in mind as you recruit. I wanted to bring this one up. I think the statistics here are somewhat debatable, and I can't remember what year this is from, but I found this graph for a couple of different years, so I'm assuming that the trend is continuing, although I've heard from some teachers in like the MIT program that might be changing. However, as it stands, and with the research that I'm able to find, I haven't been able to find anything that shows that that's changing at this point. So I want to point out that the blue is foreign-born individuals who achieve a bachelor's degree, and I can't remember how many years this was from. And the green is native-born individuals achieving a bachelor's degree. And this is with the US. So Asian students from Asia tend to get a bachelor's degree at a higher rate than Asian students from the United States. White students from Europe or other places tend to achieve a bachelor's degree at a higher rate than US-born white students. Black students from places like Africa or other places abroad tend to achieve a bachelor's degree at a much higher rate than Black students here in the United States. And this gap is actually pretty large considering. And then this one, you'll notice there's something different here. You have the foreign-born individuals achieving at a higher rate than their domestic counterparts in the US. But with Latinos, that's flipped. And we only have 9.8% on this graph. I would ignore the numbers themselves and just recognize that it's less than domestic counterparts for the foreign-born Latinos to achieve, or Latinx individuals to achieve a bachelor's degree than their domestic-born counterparts. And that needs to change. That's where you guys come in. I want you to create presentations in Spanish. I want you to speak to students in MAM or Canjobal if you speak it. I want you to recruit students who are born in other countries but are technically qualified for our program, because the access that they're going to have is less. Latinos, as we saw in that graph, have less access to education. Latino males are often expected to go into the workforce immediately after graduating from high school. And so Latino males tend to have less access to education than Latino female or Latinas, I guess. And as you can see, people who are from other countries tend to have less access to education than people who were born here in terms of Latinos. And that does not match other demographics. I mean, it's to be expected that somebody who graduated from a high school in Europe is going to do better at colleges in the United States than our domestic counterparts. We already know that the education quality in Europe and in Africa can be significantly different from the way it is here in the US. And actually a lot of the times people from Africa, people from like France, people from China, they know multiple languages and they have like a lot of specialties, a lot of things that they've studied. Education doesn't work the same way in a lot of Latin American countries. And so we want to change that here in the United States for people who are born abroad and come here. We want to make sure that they have access to an education. They tend to have less access to educational resources and actually need more support. And so I want you to be super aggressive about recruiting Latinx individuals or Latinos from other countries, as long as they qualify for our program, and especially in recruiting males, because they have less access than the females, although I definitely want to make sure that you're recruiting both. And then another thing I wanted to show you, I think I've showed all of you guys a lot of these different graphs, and I can't remember when this graph, probably from 2016. Yeah, 2016 dollars. This is the median value of net worth for families with holdings. So basically this is income for different families by degree level. So as you can see, no high school degree, people are able to earn less and less and less as the years go on. Having a high school diploma, they're able to earn more than those people who dropped out of high school, but nowadays not by much. And having some college is better than, or has been historically better than having just a high school diploma, but nowadays it's seen as exactly the same. But having a college degree, there's a huge gap in between the earnings for someone with a high school diploma or some college and someone who has a college degree. And that's because their earning potential is significantly higher and the likelihood that they will be unemployed is significantly less. So that is something that we need to talk to students about. We need them to understand their earning potential, and the quality of life that they could experience later on is going to be impacted by whether or not they have a degree. And the people around them don't know that if they're first generation, especially. I wanted to bring this up. I'm not going to go over this one in detail, but I just wanted to show another reason why I don't necessarily jump to send students to two-year colleges or community colleges is because of remediation classes. So the classes, oh, I guess this is from 2003 and 2004, so this is a while ago. No, it's from 2016, so either way. I think this survey was taken in 2003 or 2004 with a group that entered college then. But what I want you to see is that the students who are going into these remediation classes, which do not earn college credit, here, I'll put those up in case you want to read it, are generally students of color. As you can see, there's a large amount of Hispanic students being funneled into those classes and a large amount of Black students being funneled into those classes for this particular survey. And that's actually a trend that you can see at other schools as well. And you can also see that the poorest students, the students who earn the lowest 25% and the lower middle 25%, are also the students more likely to be in those remediation classes, not earning college credit for the money that they're spending. So that's another reason I don't necessarily want to send first generation low-income students or students of color to these classes, because the likelihood that a low-income student is going to be in a class that does not earn college credit, and the likelihood that a person of color is going to be in a class that doesn't earn college credit, the likelihood that both the person of color and the low-income student are also first generation is really high. That's possibly setting the student up for failure if they do not test into those 100 level classes, and if they do not immediately pass those remedial classes. So that's just a note on why we don't immediately send students to your schools, because of those remedial courses. Now, this is really important. This is where you're going to want to take notes or make sure that you memorize this list, because this is going to be really important. Your main goal for your upward bound internship duties is recruitment. And just a note, I plan to meet with you at the beginning of each of your internship sessions for maybe 30 minutes, and then I'm going to leave you to work independently after the first 2 weeks of training. I'm actually going to be counting on you to be working independently. And so I'll explain a little bit how this works now. Your main goal is recruitment. You're going to help students join the Upward Bound program, which means I want you to outreach to potential new students. You may actually know people already who would be perfect for the Upward Bound program, younger siblings, cousins, your friends' younger siblings, cousins. They're perfect to try to get into the Upward Bound program, as long as they actually want to go to college and as long as they qualify for the program. So outreach to them, talk to them, and see if they want to join. And then I need you to help them complete the application and follow up with them to just make sure they're turning in everything they need to turn in. Usually the Upward Bound application isn't just a simple, like, fill it out and you're done. It does take some time, because it is a federal application, and because we're dealing with minors and multiple institutions, it's going to take a minute. But our application's online now. And I'm going to have you help students complete the online application. The training for that will be tomorrow, and you'll get to look at it and you'll learn a little bit more about it. With recruitment, I will also likely be asking you to do class recruitment presentations. So I may have you join, Ms. Burlett's advisory class. Right now, with everything being online, I don't know if that's necessarily practical. So I would also accept videos that she could play in her class. And I definitely need recruitment videos in Spanish, or I need some recruitment materials in Spanish. And so if you want to do something that way, that would be just fine. That'd be a perfect project, actually. Yeah, as I mentioned, I will need you to help the students fill out the online application, because it is going to require that they give us some sensitive information and that they upload some documents. Generally, students don't like to give us their social security numbers. Families don't like to give social security numbers, but we do require it for the program. So you're going to have to remind them we're a federal program. I think that you guys are in a position where you can be a lot more understanding and empathetic toward students who are concerned about that. It's not just students who have documentation issues who are concerned about the social security number, though. All the students tend to have some issues wanting to give that up. Some just fill it out. But a lot of students actually don't want to give up their social security number regardless of their demographics. So they're probably going to need some help. You're going to probably need to explain that they need to give that to us. They don't have to put it in the actual application. They can give it to us and we can enter it into the database separately. But regardless, we need to have that. Regardless of how we get it, we need to have it. And if you have them reach out to us, if they don't want to fill in the social security number box, then we'll get it from them by calling them or some other method that they'll feel more secure about anyway. Just keep in mind that our application online is now part of Radius, which is Evergreen's application system, and so it's actually quite secure. You will have a quota. You will need to enroll 3 students completely through the process, meaning you outreach to them, you give them the application link, you help them fill out the application, you help them turn in any missing documentation they may need, you help gather any transcript, actually Elizabeth will do that, you help gather any other documentation that they may need in addition to their personal documentation, and you help us schedule the interview with them Once they do the interview, they're officially part of the Upward Bound program and they're fully enrolled. And so I need you to do that entire process with 3 students by week 10. 3 students isn't a lot, but I think you'll find that getting students all the way to the end can possibly be a challenge. And so keep that in mind as you're recruiting. Don't only talk to 3 students, because the likelihood that those 3 students will go all the way through with the enrollment process isn't 100%. So talk to multiple students, and enrolling more than 3 students is definitely helpful. At the end of each day, I need you to email Elizabeth from your Evergreen email and update her on your progress with recruiting the students. Even if all you did was you texted them and you didn't hear back from them, likely you're going to be working with multiple students, so you'll need to give her an update on multiple students. And you need to let her know where you are in the process. She's going to have to take over for you at certain points. And so she needs to be up to date, especially with tracking in the application. She'll tell you how she plans to track it. I won't go over that. But she needs to be in the know. You need to let her know what's going on. And so at the end of each day that you're working with our internship, I need you to email her and let her know what you did. Doesn't have to be a long email, just has to be an email from your Evergreen email that she can, understand what happened. Another thing that I will need you to do as part of your duties is to provide is to provide input on Upward Bound services. So you've been a part of the Upward Bound program for years. You know what works with Upward Bound and what doesn't work with Upward Bound for you. Let us know that. If the things that we did in the past working with you didn't work, let us know that. If there's anything you wish we would have done or wish we would have done more, let us know that, because we need to know what students are going to click with. I've been doing this for a really long time, and sometimes I can get stuck doing the same thing over and over again with different groups of UB students. And the same thing that worked with a class from 2016 is not going to necessarily work with a class from 2021. So definitely let us know if there's anything that we're doing that we need to change, or if there's anything that we do that you guys really appreciate and we need to step up and do it more, then let us know. That's going to be really helpful for us, because sometimes students are really hard to engage. Sometimes they don't want to come to our events. Sometimes they don't want to go to our field trips, even though we're probably going to be teaching them something that's good for them, that they'll need, and that they'll probably want to ask about later. We need to know how to improve our services and how to get them more likely to participate. And so let us know when we do something right or when we do something wrong. I will also need you to assist in the assessment of student and community needs. So it's kind of similar to providing input on our services, but let us know if you know certain students are encountering certain issues, if you know that the community is having an issue in a certain way, and if we do our programming in a particular way that the community isn't going to react well, especially if it's like the Guatemalan community that I don't actually have access to, and you guys do know how they would react to it. Let us know. We need to understand what the community needs from us, and we need the community to be on board with these students going to college, because at the time the community doesn't understand how important it is, and as a result they don't know how to support the students. So it's helpful if you let us know what those needs are, and especially if you let us know what would work to help address those needs. And then I need you on Wednesdays to join the Upward Bound staff meetings. You don't have to be there longer than the first hour. In fact, I'll probably kick you out after the first hour. But every Wednesday at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2 p.m., I need you to join our staff meeting so you can give the entire team an update, and we can do any troubleshooting that we might need to do. Sometimes we'll encounter issues with students, and you're going to need our help with that. And you also have a project that you're going to be assigned. I think you're going to be assigned this during week 3. Your professors will tell you about it. I don't actually know the details of it, but I know that it's some kind of give back project for the organization that we're working with, which is Upward Bound. And so I will give you time during your internship time to work on that if you need it. Obviously, the first 2 weeks, we won't have any time for that because it's training, but starting week 3, like I said, you're going to be meeting with me during the first half hour of your internship time, and the rest of your time you're going to be managing on your own. You're going to need to figure out if you need to reach out to certain students to check up on their progress, if you need to reach out to new students, if you need to reach out to any teachers to see if you can talk to their students, you're going to need to manage that on your own. I can help provide guidance on it, but sometimes you're going to be working really, really hard, talking to tons of people and barely having any time. And then other days, people aren't going to respond to you and you'll have lots of time. And so make sure that you balance your time in such a way that you can work on your give back project that your professors make, because your internship time is going to be yours. And part of that needs to be working on that project. We have 10 hours of internship time per week. And so plan accordingly. Here are your duties. This is what you need to do. You need to have 3 students in the program by week 10. Can you do that with the way you're balancing time and work on your project, or do you need to adjust your time? And Priscilla did a little bit of a presentation that I won't be able to include in this video about time management. But if you need any help with time management, TRIO can be a great resource. Academic and career advising can be a great resource, and you can always come to us. You can even ask Priscilla if she can send you her presentation, and I'm sure she'll be fine with that. Okay, some program policies. I need to go over this just because we need you to understand some of our rules. I just copied and pasted this directly from our staff handbook, which I already sent out to you guys. So you can refer to that anytime you want. But in addition to Evergreen having policies, and I'm not going to list Evergreen's policies here, our program also has some policies. So one of them, you're expected to show up on time and be ready to work each day. If you're going to be late for any reason, or if you don't have the ability to work, let me know. It's very important now that you're a part of the Upward Bound team that I know when I can expect you to be working with us, and I know when you're not able to. That way we can pick up the slack if there's any students depending on us. If there's anything that needs to happen, we can pick up the slack for that. So do let me know if you're going to be late or if you're not going to be able to show up. Usually I'm pretty relaxed if people are going to be a little bit late. Please don't be more than 15 minutes late, or I'm assuming you're not coming. Usually I'm pretty relaxed about people being late, but if students are depending on us, or if the program's depending on us, then that's when I'm not flexible about being late. That's when people need to be there, and I get a little bit more strict about it. Obviously, use or possession of alcohol and or drugs on campus, at field trips, or anytime working with the students will be grounds for termination. So you need to be in your right mind. I don't care what you do on your own time, except that I do care about you and your health. I don't need you guys under the influence of anything when you're working with the students, because that can actually cause some problems for the students and make it so where they're less likely to succeed in college later, especially if they get confusing information from you because you're not in your right state of mind. So please don't talk to the students if you're going to get messed up. Go do something else during that time. Upward Bound time, you're sober and you're working productively with the students. Your own time, you can do whatever within the law or within reason. Keep yourself safe. But definitely don't be messing around while you're on duty with my students. This one should be pretty obvious, but it's going to be a little bit confusing, I think, because you guys are relatively the same age as some of the Upward Bound students. So this is kind of a gray area for you. Sexual or romantic involvement with any Upward Bound student will be reported to authorities and shall be grounds for immediate termination. Usually I'm sending the staff handbook out to adults who are going to be working with our summer program, and I need to make sure that they don't view our students in a romantic way, to put it nicely. But you guys are about the same age. You guys actually may already have relationships with Upward Bound students if they're only a year younger than you. I don't actually know that, and I don't think that I necessarily have the power to control that. However, if you're an official Upward Bound intern and you're officially enrolled as an Upward Bound intern through the Evergreen State College, then any work that you do with that student or anything that you do with that student could reflect back on the Upward Bound program and the college itself. And so even dating somebody a year younger than you who happens to be in a high school college access program called Upward Bound is kind of a gray area, and it's probably not in your best interest to do that. You're not going to be working with the seniors. You're not going to be working with the seniors and juniors. You're going to be working with the freshmen and sophomores. I want you to recruit younger students. And so definitely it's going to be creepy if you get into a sexual or romantic relationship with freshmen or sophomores while you guys are in college. That's definitely creepy, and I'm definitely not going to be okay with that. So no romantic or sexual involvement with any of the Upward Bound students. And if you're already dating somebody who's only like a year younger than you, who's an Upward Bound or whatever, since you're Upward Bound alumni, let me know and I'll make sure that you're not working with that student so that we don't have a conflict of interest. Because that's a very serious matter that could easily turn into something like sexual harassment if we're not careful about how we handle that. If you just let me know if you're already in a relationship with one Upward Bound student, then I'll make sure that you're not working with them, and we'll make sure that the relationship's professional when you're on Upward Bound time. Otherwise, you're going to be working with students who are significantly younger than you are and in very vulnerable positions, and you're going to be in a position of power in relation to them. So absolutely no sexual or romantic involvement with them, as long as you're part of the program and as long as they're part of the program. Students should never be in a private vehicle or of staff, or you should never be in their vehicle. Basically, this isn't really applicable because at this point you could be reaching out to somebody who's your younger sibling, you could be reaching out to a cousin, you could be reaching out to your friend's younger sibling and give them a ride or something. You guys could already be in the car with the people that you guys are planning to recruit, and that's something that's you're with them in a different way in that way. The reason we have this in there is because we don't want people being accused of things that they didn't do, or we don't want people doing things they shouldn't be doing, and we don't want to jeopardize the lives of the students. Some people aren't very good drivers, and the driver of the car who's working on Upward Bound times has to take responsibility for the Upward Bound student if they're in their car, which means if you get into a wreck, you're taking responsibility for any damages to the student. That's not worth it. So don't drive students around, especially now that we're in COVID time and there's absolutely no reason to give students a ride anywhere. Usually that's more relevant to the summer program, but just need to say, try not to give your recruits rides anywhere. There's no reason for it, as long as you're an Upward Bound representative. All right. This one, socializing with students beyond the scope of the position is forbidden. That's actually not relevant in this case. That's more relevant if you're adults working with the summer program. I understand that you're probably going to be socializing with some of the people that you're reaching out to because you're probably reaching out to friends or people related to your friends. So I would say that that's not really applicable to you. This one definitely isn't applicable. This is mainly for field trips and the summer program. That this basically says that we're going to separate boys and girls. We're not going to let them sleep in the same rooms together. And even gay and lesbian couples, if they're in a relationship together, we're not going to room them together if they're dating. This last one is actually really, really important. This one does apply to you, even though you're not advisors, and you won't actually encounter this most likely. Sometimes students say things that indicate to us that they're in danger, and we are obligated by law to do something about it. So just know that all Upward Bound employees are obligated to report abuse in accordance with Washington state mandatory reporting laws. So if anyone decides to tell you something that indicates to you that they may be in danger when they're at home, especially at the hands of their family members, like their parents or siblings, you have to tell us. I think there's like a $250,000 fine associated with it if you don't tell us and it's not reported and the student gets hurt. Mandatory reporting laws are for the protection of the student. And sometimes they don't like it because sometimes CPS comes and takes kids away from their parents when abuse has been reported, but it is a law and it is to protect the kids. If you are uncomfortable, well, I mean, everything about mandatory reporting is uncomfortable. But if a student starts telling you something that indicates they may have endured abuse at home, or that they may be in danger at home, then you can interrupt them and let them know that you're a mandatory reporter, and that if they tell you anything that indicates that they're in danger, you'll have to report it. And then students can decide whether or not they want to continue telling you what they're about to say, or they can edit it in such a way where they're a little bit more protective of their family or something like that. Do let us know anything that sounds suspicious. Let us know about it. We won't necessarily report everything they tell you. We're only going to report the stuff that indicates to us that they're being abused or that they're in danger in some way, which is very rarely. That very rarely happens. But sometimes there are other things that do happen that we need to help with, like a parent and a student get into a fight and the student's now homeless living off a friend's couch. We need to know about that because we may be able to help the student get a hold of some resources. We may be able to help the student be more successful despite that. So let us know. And if you encounter any situation where the student's trying to tell you something and you're thinking it might be a mandatory reporting situation, you do have the right to tell them that you are a mandatory reporter, and they can make the decision to tell you if they want to. So I actually included this document, which I already shared with everybody who is in this internship. I'll pull it up now. Oh, actually, I can pull it up right here. This document is actually a list of issues that I've researched. I didn't come up with this on my own, of issues impacting first generation to college students. And it also is a list of issues that impact first generation professionals. So if you were a first generation to college student and then you get a job and you're in a good career or whatever, then you're likely a first generation professional. So these are some of the issues that they encounter. I'll go over the main bullets, but I'm not going to go over the smaller bullets. But some issues are like lower levels of academic preparation, lower educational or career aspirations. So not wanting as good of a career as you could, like wanting to be a nurse instead of a doctor. That's a good example. Less encouragement and support to attend college or pursue professional level careers, especially from close friends and family. Less knowledge about college or grad school application processes. Fewer resources to pay for college and course materials. Less access to course materials, so not having the Wi-Fi to get to your Zoom class when you're required to be there. Imposter syndrome, which is feeling like you don't belong in college or like you're faking it and someone's going to find you out eventually. And that happens with a lot of people. And isolation and discrimination, and that happens especially with people who identify on the LGBTQ spectrum, people who are people of color. That actually happens quite a bit, and especially people from other cultures that might clash with the traditional students. So please read through this list. This is going to be necessary for you to do an activity later on that's associated with this training. But please have this list read by the time you come to the internship tomorrow. So those are some issues impacting first generation students. It's going to be kind of helpful for you to be able to think about and identify some of these issues on your own. You're not going to be asked to do that like an advisor would be, but it is helpful to be able to do that. So here's some needs or some issues, barriers that we identified earlier in the training. And I want you to, as a result of this, I want you to, for homework, I guess, by tomorrow when you come to the training, I want you to have written a paragraph or two about issues that you know impact first generation, low income, or students of color. And this can be high school students, this can be college students or beyond. But I want to know what issues that you're able to identify in students. And it could be issues that are on this list. You can copy some of the issues off this list. But I want you to talk about where you've seen these issues. If you've seen them in yourself, if you've seen them in other people, if you've heard about them, I want you to talk about where you've heard of them. And I want you to come up with at least five barriers to education for first generation, low income, or students of color. And like I said, you can use this list, but I also want you to pay special attention to things that you've identified that have happened to you or people that you've known or that you've witnessed happen to other people. So here's an example. Here's a few examples actually of what we came up with earlier. Put it in present mode to make it a little easier. So language barriers was one of the first things that came up. So not really knowing English very well and having English only education available makes it a little bit challenging. And that's a need that that students of color often have. They need access through the language barrier to their education. Not knowing anyone in college, so going and being completely on your own, not really knowing if you know anybody around you or if you can get to know them. It's also part of the fun of being in college, but that was one of the issues that was identified earlier. Not knowing what to do in college, not knowing what to do to apply for college. So just showing up your first day and kind of being clueless about where to go or what to do. Having trouble asking for help. That's actually really, really common with first generation students. They either don't know how to ask for help, they don't know how to put into words what they need help with, but they know they need help. Or even just being too proud, like, no, I don't need help. That's for somebody else. Or if I ask for help, I'm going to take away help from other people. That's really, really common for first generation individuals to worry about. How to get scholarships or apply for financial aid is another need that was identified. Microaggressions, and I'm not sure if you know what microaggressions are, but microaggressions, as I understand them, are kind of like when white people do something racist and they didn't mean to do anything racist when they did it. Um, that's a microaggression. So it's not quite overtly racist, but it doesn't make you feel very good, and it's not always easy to point out how it's racist. Trying to think of a good example off of the top of my head, but it's usually passive aggressive. So actually, I get a lot of questions about my name, like and being half white. People often don't know what my ethnicity is or my race is. So usually people will start out by asking, where does my name come from? That doesn't really work because my name's French, and so I'll explain that. And then they'll ask, oh, well, where are you from then? And I'm actually from Olympia, so that doesn't give them the answer they want. And so usually they'll ask where my family's from, and then I'll tell, if I talk about my mom and don't talk about my dad, then they get really confused because my mom's German Irish. But they're basically trying to get me to answer the question, what race are you? And they're doing it in really passive aggressive ways, asking about where my name comes from, asking where I come from, where my family comes from, and all of that is just to ask what race I am, why I'm not 100% white. That happens all the time with me, and that's considered a microaggression, and I don't think that they're necessarily meaning to be racist, but the hyper focus on my race makes it to where they're not willing to pay attention to anything else I have to say until they figure that out, and that is a little bit racist. So that's a microaggression, and there are lots of microaggressions, and usually white people don't know that they're racist and will argue that they're not. So that's something to watch out for in college. You'll encounter that a lot in college, actually. Housing and room and board, that's another thing that we came across that is something that's challenging, trying to figure out how you're going to get into housing, where you're going to live, if you're going to have roommates, how you're going to eat. That can be a little challenging, especially if you're low income and you don't know how you're going to pay for it. And then getting help with application essays. So if you're applying for scholarships or anything like that, or any study abroad programs or something like that, I don't know if you have to apply for those, it's just the scholarships associated with the study abroad stuff. But getting help with those essays, or even essays for your class, can be a challenge because that language barrier can actually cause a lot of issues, but college has different expectations for your writing. And so all of those things are challenges that affect first generation to college students, low income students, and students of color for sure. And usually students of color are a combination of first generation and low income. Usually first generation students are also low income, and low income students are often first generation students. So a lot of this is intersectional too. So keep that in mind. And as you're recruiting, keep in mind what some of the needs the students are going to have that you encounter. I brought up a Black student wearing a University of Washington sweatshirt earlier. If a Black student is wearing a University of Washington sweatshirt, there's a chance they actually want to go to the University of Washington. But if they're a student of color, likely they're going to have a lot of these barriers in their way, preventing them from direct access to an education at the University of Washington. So that's a perfect candidate for Upward Bound, where they could come in, they could get our help, they can become more competitive for University of Washington, and they can set their goals a little bit higher than if they didn't know what to do. If they didn't know how to fill out the college application, they don't know anybody who's been to college, so they don't know how to talk about that. They don't want to ask for help. They're used to dealing with microaggressions, which could include people assuming that they're not able to go to University of Washington because of their race. not knowing how they're going to live in Seattle, not knowing if their essays are good enough because they're afraid to ask for help with their essays, and then getting a hold of scholarships or financial aid when they don't even know how to ask the questions about that. They may not know that that's available if they're first generation. So all of these things come into play with your recruitment, and being able to identify the different needs that the students have is going to be really, really helpful in identifying which students need to be recruited for our program the most. So that's all I have for you today. I'm hoping that this video will be really helpful for you in catching up with the training that you missed. Once again, I want you to read the list of issues that are impacting first-generation students. I want you to take notes on the slide of your specific duties and maybe come up with some ideas for students that you could reach out to. That's not required, but that'll be helpful. And definitely what I need to have you do by the time you come to the training tomorrow is make sure that you write a paragraph identifying at least 5 different issues that you've seen impacting other first generation to college students, other low-income students or other students of color, or that you've encountered yourself, and write about how they've impacted you. We're going to continue this training tomorrow, where you're going to learn a little bit more about how to fill out our new online application, which unfortunately is only in English at this time. Elizabeth is going to walk you through that, and I'm also going to give you the opportunity to fill out the TRIO application. So let me know if you have any questions between now and tomorrow, and I will be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to send this out to you guys so that you can use this in place of the training that you missed today. So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, and I hope you have a good night. Don't forget to do those activities for us. Bye.